Hi all, so somebody asked if I could post a video of a gearbox, lower gearbox stripped down. This is off of my Mars Ics Cxp Carbine. I've put the upper and lower together. There's a reason why I've done this. If I can pull it apart, which is a bit stiff. This little bit here has got a spring on it that's quite important, which basically makes the two connect together. So in that position, when it's in the gun, they snap together. So it's quite stiff to get apart, because normally with a obviously top receiver on, it's easy to get apart. So I'm going to do a quick strip down video of it. I'll put it on blue paper towel so you can see all the different bits that are associated to it. Somebody said they will need, it will be handy. So firstly, once it's stripped out the gun, remove all the screws, place them to one side. I've already obviously taken the motor off. You can't get the gearbox out of the gun without removing the motor, and then there's two screws up the handle of the motor that connect here onto the gearbox. So before I take this last screw out, I'll just show you. So the handle screws just go in here and in here. So it's quite simple. The cog you can see is for the selector switch for semi and full auto. And also the other thing I'll do, so just so it's nice and close, this is a standard gearbox. The previous gearbox was an S3. There's a tiny little spring in here. So tools I use is a Phillips screwdriver. Sometimes I use a pair of tweezers, and I use quite a small headed Phillips as well, almost like a watchmaker's Phillips. So with all the screws out of it, simply pull the top off of it. This is loose now, and then you can start to take gears out. So this is the gear that goes on the bevel gear for the motor. That's the one that attaches to the upper receiver, and that's another gear in the middle. Things to note, there's obviously spacers on this. My gearbox is quite greasy, but there's a shim there, not a space for a shim, that stops the gears moving about too much. The lubrication I use is called Super Lube. That was I did a bit of reading and somebody recommended it. When this is sprung loaded here, it's got a small spring here. This has got a tiny little spring here. So I'm just going to put that in my hand so hopefully you can see that. And it's quite important to get that back on right when you put it back together. So it goes in that orientation with the little piece of spring still sticking up. And that little piece of spring still sits, sits along here. So you can imagine the spring still sitting up like my screwdriver. It goes in here. So there's obviously spring here if you want to take the trigger contacts out. There's a spring across here. There is a spring under the trigger. That can be quite fiddly to put back in. And there's also on this part here a tiny little spring. So if I take that out to show you what it looks like. So that goes on there like that, and underneath there. There's a reason why it's like this, and I'll show you in a minute. So to put it back together, I'm not going to talk about shimming. There's loads of videos on shimming. Cog there. This has got like a cutout here, so it allows basically for no. Get this on right. Hold this down. It's sometimes easier. This will turn one way only, so it won't go clockwise. It'll only go anti-clockwise. And then this is obviously the main drive gear that moves the piston backwards and forwards, or forward or backwards. And then I put this back on, which is the part that I mentioned earlier, and get this in the right orientation. That's about right. And it's just a case of putting the top shell back on. I've got a shim there, which I can put on there. I've got a shim there, so if you reverse the orientation, it will go on there. These bushings do push in and out, but I will advise that if you do push them out, you've got to support the gearbox casing, because if not, because it's only die cast, you can bend it. And then if I hold that up there and give it a wiggle, any luck. No, try again, make sure everything's in line. That's all right. That's all right, that's all right. A little bit fiddly. Might use a flat screwdriver here just to push this little sprung loaded thing up. And with any luck, as long as that's up, it'll go back together. So, quick test, I can turn the gearbox. And then all you got to do is install the screws back again. These two screws are exactly the same length. So this one that have been recessed into the gearbox. This front screw is long compared to the rear screw. It's slightly longer, so that goes in the front. This screw goes in the rear. Do it all back up again. Don't put the front screw too tight. I found you've still got to be able to, this has still got to be able to move, and that is too tight. So I'll back it off a little bit so it moves. It won't fall out because obviously it's sandwiched in the gearbox. The two most important screws really is, well, I would say these recess screws, which are here. Just nip them up. Don't need to tighten them up too much. Gearbox is still good. Selector switch goes on. Trigger still works fine. Like I said, this slots in there like that. I probably need to turn the gears so it will fit. Get this around the right way. There you go, back together. I hope you find it useful. If you want to know any questions, then yeah, just feel free to ask. I've stripped, this is obviously rear wide, but I've stripped a front wide one apart. The selector switch is slightly different. It's an old Ics Cxp QRS hog. But yeah, hope the video becomes it was useful to you. Take care, cheers, bye.